She fed a homeless man every day. Then he shocked her with, "I'm a billionaire." Before we begin the story, please leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Chloe worked tirelessly at the farmer's market in her small Midwestern town, selling produce to support her sick mother. Despite the constant struggle, Chloe never complained. Every coin she earned went to her mother's medicine. Each day she noticed a blind homeless man, Ethan, sitting near the market gate. He always held a wooden stick and had a bowl, but it was always empty. The children mocked him, throwing stones and calling him useless, but Chloe felt sympathy for him. She would bring him bread every day, even though she barely had enough to feed herself. "It's not much, but it's better than nothing," she'd say. The whispers from others stung. She can't feed herself, but feeds beggars. Still, Chloe continued. One day, she began to suspect something wasn't right. Ethan's hand reached out too perfectly for someone blind, but when she asked, he simply replied, "Does it matter?" Chloe's bond with Ethan grew, but so did the weight of her Aunt Vivian's pressure. Vivian constantly urged her to marry a wealthy man, Richmond, to solve their financial troubles. Chloe resisted, knowing it wasn't the right path. But the strain on Chloe's heart was growing. Her mother's health was worsening, and the bills were piling up. Chloe's routine remained the same. Every day, she woke before dawn to prepare for the farmer's market. She took extra care to make sure her stall was set up perfectly, the fresh fruits and vegetables neatly arranged, and every corner tidy. As much as she hated the attention she got from the other vendors who constantly whispered behind her back about her wasted charity, she couldn't stop herself. She had learned long ago that the market was about survival, and the world outside it didn't show much mercy. The morning sun seemed to burn brighter as the day went on, but Chloe was used to it. She pulled a straw hat over her head, shielding her from the heat. The farmer's market was the only place where she felt like she could catch her breath, even if it was just for a moment. As customers walked past her stall, many of them turned their heads at the sight of her, some with pity, others with disdain. Still, Chloe kept her focus, serving her customers with a smile. Despite the hard work, there was a sense of peace when she looked at Ethan. Every day he would arrive, quietly sitting at his usual spot near the market gate. His hands, though visibly worn and rough, would remain still as he waited for anyone, to drop a coin in his bowl. But day after day, it stayed empty. "Good morning, Ethan," Chloe would say quietly as she approached him with a small loaf of bread from her own stall. His eyes remained hidden behind his dark glasses, but she could tell by the way he tilted his head that he acknowledged her presence. "It's not much," she would whisper, placing the bread gently in the bowl, "but it's better than nothing." He would always nod his head slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." The exchange was simple, but every day it felt more significant. It was a small act of kindness in a world where everything seemed so hard and unforgiving. Still, Chloe couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was something she didn't know. Something about Ethan didn't add up. He never seemed hungry when she handed him the bread. He didn't react as someone truly in need would. His hands were too precise when they reached for the food. His movements too practiced for someone who had been on the streets for so long. One morning, as she handed him the usual piece of bread, she noticed the way his fingers landed perfectly in the bowl, without hesitation. It was the way a person might touch something familiar, something they had done 100 times before. Chloe's brow furrowed slightly. "Are you really blind?" she blurted out, before she could stop herself. Ethan tilted his head, his face still concealed behind his glasses. For a moment, there was a long silence between them. Chloe held her breath, unsure of what to expect. "Does it matter?" Ethan replied softly, his voice devoid of any anger or irritation, just calm. Chloe stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. He had avoided answering her question, but his words left her unsettled. What did he mean by that? Did he really not want her to know the truth? or was there something else going on? She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story, more than he was letting on. That afternoon, after the market had closed and she had packed up her stall, Chloe decided to visit her mother. The days had been long and the weight of everything, her sick mother, the growing tension with her aunt, the nagging feeling about Ethan, was taking its toll. She needed the quiet of home, the place where she could relax, if only for a moment. Her mother's condition had been steadily declining over the past few weeks. Each day, Chloe found it harder to leave her side, watching as the woman who had always been her rock grew weaker by the day. The house was still warm, but it felt hollow, as if the life that once filled it was slowly fading away. "Mom, I'm back," Chloe whispered softly as she entered the bedroom where her mother lay. The smell of herbal tea lingered in the air, the same scent that Chloe had grown up with, the smell that used to comfort her. Now it only reminded her of how little time she had left with her mother. Her mother smiled faintly when she saw Chloe, her thin hand reaching out for her daughter's. "How was the market, dear?" she asked, her voice weak but full of love. "It was fine," Chloe replied, sitting beside the bed and gently holding her mother's hand. "I sold everything, just like always." Her mother nodded, her pale face looking even more fragile than usual. "You're so strong, Chloe," she whispered. "But you need to take care of yourself, too." Chloe swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'm fine, Mom," she said, trying to sound reassuring. "I'm taking care of everything. Just focus on getting better." Her mother's smile faded slightly as she coughed weakly. Chloe could see the concern in her eyes. She knew her mother was scared, but she couldn't show it. Not now. Not when her mother needed her most. "I'm going to find a way, Mom," Chloe said, her voice filled with determination. "I'll get the money for your medicine. I promise." Her mother nodded slowly, her eyes full of love and trust. "You have a good heart, Chloe. Don't let the world change that. Promise me." "I promise, Mom," Chloe whispered, her voice breaking as she kissed her mother's forehead. She stayed by her side for hours, watching over her, but deep down, Chloe knew that time was running out. As the evening drew near, Chloe reluctantly left her mother's side to return to the market. She could hear the whispers again as she passed by the stalls. The vendors never stopped gossiping about her, and this time it was about the homeless man who had been seen talking to her for days. The town was full of speculation. Chloe was used to the judgment, but today it felt heavier. That night, as Chloe made her way home, Vivian was waiting for her in the living room, a stern look on her face. Vivian had been quiet lately, but Chloe could tell something was coming. "Chloe," Vivian began, her voice cold, "we need to talk." Chloe sighed. She knew where this was going. "About what, Aunt Vivian?" she asked, already feeling a headache coming on. Vivian's eyes narrowed. "About your future. I've been talking to Richmond again. He's a wealthy businessman, and he's willing to help us. He wants to marry you, Chloe." Chloe froze. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not marrying him." Vivian stood up from the chair, her expression hardening. "You don't have a choice. Your mother's illness is getting worse, and we can't afford to keep going like this. You need to think about the bigger picture. Richmond can provide for you, and he'll take care of everything." Chloe shook her head. "I won't do it. I won't marry someone I don't love just to solve our problems. I'll find another way." Vivian stepped forward, grabbing Chloe's arm tightly. "You're being foolish. Do you want your mother to die because of your pride? We need this money, Chloe. You need to do your part." Chloe pulled her arm away, staring at her aunt in disbelief. "I won't do it, Aunt Vivian," she repeated, her voice shaking with emotion. "I won't sell myself to fix things. I'll find a way on my own." Vivian's face twisted with frustration. "You're a burden, Chloe. Always have been." "You can't see it, but I've been trying to help you. But if you're going to refuse, then you'll have to face the consequences." With that, Vivian stormed out of the room, leaving Chloe alone with her thoughts. Chloe's heart raced. She didn't know what to do. But one thing was clear. Her aunt would stop at nothing to force her into this marriage. Chloe had to figure out a way to make her own decisions. The next day, Chloe headed back to the market, her mind heavy with the weight of the decisions ahead. But as she arrived, she saw something that caught her off guard. Ethan wasn't at his usual spot by the market gate. The bowl was empty, and the space where he sat every day was vacant. Chloe's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't explain why, but the absence of Ethan felt like a loss. She looked around the market, but there was no sign of him. The usual crowd moved past, indifferent to the missing beggar. Chloe felt a strange pang in her chest. Had something happened to him? Was he gone for good? And if so, why did it feel like she had lost more than just a stranger? Chloe stood in the middle of the market, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. But deep down, she knew that this was only the beginning of something bigger. Something was coming, something that would change everything. Chloe couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that had crept into her heart ever since she asked Ethan about his blindness. His calm, almost dismissive response, "Does it matter?" echoed in her mind every time she saw him. She had always felt a strange connection to him, but now something felt off. The more she thought about it, the more questions arose. Why did he never ask for food? Why did he always seem so still, so composed? Most homeless people, especially those pretending to be blind, would at least show signs of need. But Ethan never appeared desperate, never seemed truly hungry, even when he sat there all day. His hand, the one that reached for the bread every time she gave it to him, never trembled or fumbled around the bowl like someone who couldn't see. It was too controlled, too practiced. That evening, after another long day at the market, Chloe couldn't let it go any longer. She had been avoiding the thought, trying to convince herself it didn't matter. But she was wrong. It did matter. Ethan's mystery had grown too deep to ignore, and it gnawed at her, making her feel like something important, was slipping through her fingers. She had to know the truth. She had to confront him. It wasn't easy. The market was busy, and the sun was beginning to dip behind the trees. The festival was approaching, and Chloe felt the weight of that looming event pressing on her. People were talking about it, the excitement growing in the town. But Chloe couldn't care about the festival. Not now. She gathered her things and packed up her stall in the usual way, going through the motions while her mind raced. Her heart beat faster when she spotted him, Ethan, sitting in his usual spot by the gate, as still as ever. The crowd was thicker today, and some of the town's children were nearby, giggling as they threw stones at him. Chloe felt a pang of anger rise in her chest, but she pushed it down. She wasn't there to fight them. She was there to confront Ethan. Taking a deep breath, Chloe made her way toward him. Her feet felt heavier with each step. As she got closer, she could feel her pulse quicken. This was it. This was the moment she'd been avoiding. "Ethan," she called softly, her voice trembling slightly. He turned his head toward her, his dark glasses hiding any sign of recognition. He always did that, the slow turn of his head as though he knew she was there even without looking. The same unchanging gesture, day after day. But today, Chloe wasn't just another passerby. Today, she had a question. "Are you really blind?" she asked again, more firmly this time. Ethan tilted his head slightly, and for a moment, there was silence. The market's noise seemed to fade into the background. Chloe's stomach twisted in knots, waiting for his response. "Does it matter?" he asked again, but this time his tone was softer, less detached. There was something different in his voice, something that made Chloe's heart race even faster. "Yes, it matters," she said, almost before she realized she'd spoken. "I've been bringing you food every day, but now I'm not sure if I should." If you're pretending, why would you ask me to keep helping you? For a moment, Ethan said nothing. His hand moved to his bowl, and he adjusted the piece of bread that Chloe had placed there earlier. He didn't seem in any rush to answer. The silence between them grew heavy, stretching out longer than it should have. Chloe's patience was wearing thin. Her frustration began to bubble up again, but just as she was about to speak, Ethan broke the silence. "I'm not pretending," he said quietly, his voice steady. "But you're right to be suspicious. I didn't want anyone to know." Chloe's breath caught in her throat. She had not expected him to admit it. "Know what?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan paused, his fingers lightly tracing the edge of the bowl. "I'm not what you think I am, and I wasn't always this person you see here." Chloe's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure if she was relieved or more confused. But she felt something stirring inside her, an undeniable urge to know more. She couldn't let this moment slip away. Not now. Not after everything. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Who are you then?" Ethan's head tilted down, and for the first time, he seemed to be weighing his words carefully. "I'm not some beggar you can pity. I've lost everything. My family, my business, my life as I knew it." The words were sharp, heavy with something Chloe couldn't quite understand. But it was the way he said them. Like he wasn't just speaking about the past, but about the raw wound that had never healed. "Why pretend?" Chloe asked, her voice softer now. "Why stay like this on the streets when you have all this?" Ethan sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. "Because I needed to know if there was any good left in the world. If people were still capable of kindness, or if it had all been replaced by greed and selfishness. I wanted to see how far people would go to help, without asking for anything in return." Chloe stood still, her mind whirling. She had no idea what to make of this. The man who had sat silently by the gate every day, who had accepted her small acts of kindness without ever asking for anything, he was a billionaire? Her instincts told her that something wasn't quite right, but there was an honesty in his voice that she couldn't deny. "So, all this time?" Chloe asked, shaking her head, still processing his words. "You've been testing me?" Ethan nodded, but his expression softened. "Not just you. Everyone. But you were different. You didn't look at me like I was a charity case. You just saw me for who I am. And that's more than most people ever did." Chloe was speechless. The man sitting before her was no ordinary beggar. He had manipulated her kindness, tested her, yet, in a way it felt like a relief to hear that he wasn't just playing some cruel game. Still, Chloe couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. She had shared so much of herself with him, all while thinking he was someone in need. Now, all of that seemed so much more complicated. "So what now?" Chloe asked, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. "Now that you've seen what you wanted, what do you want from me?" Ethan looked at her, and for the first time Chloe saw the hint of a smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Nothing," he said, his voice quiet. "I don't want anything from you, Chloe. I just wanted to see if you could still believe in kindness. And now, I think I've found what I was looking for." Chloe didn't know how to respond. Her mind was spinning, caught between disbelief and awe. Was this a test she had passed? Or was it just another game that Ethan had been playing all along? Before she could speak again, she heard footsteps approaching. It was Vivian. Chloe turned to see her aunt coming toward them, her face twisted with annoyance. "Chloe!" Vivian called, her voice sharp. "What are you doing over here talking to this man? We need to get moving. Richmond is expecting you at dinner." Chloe felt a wave of frustration wash over her. She had just uncovered a truth that could change everything, and Vivian was already trying to drag her back into the life she'd been fighting to escape. "I'm not going anywhere with you," Chloe said firmly, her voice stronger than she expected. Vivian's eyes narrowed. What did you say? I said, I'm not going with you, Chloe repeated, standing her ground. You've been controlling me my whole life, and I'm done. You can't make me do this anymore. Vivian opened her mouth to argue, but before she could say anything, Ethan stood up slowly. Let her go, Vivian, he said calmly. Chloe is her own person now. Vivian's eyes flicked between Ethan and Chloe, then back to Ethan with disdain. Who do you think you are? She sneered. You think just because you've got money, you can interfere with my family? Ethan didn't flinch. I don't need to interfere, Vivian. The truth always comes out in the end. Vivian's face turned red with fury, but Chloe wasn't intimidated anymore. She stood tall, her heart beating with resolve. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was finally in control of her life. You're right, Chloe said quietly, her voice steady. The truth does come out. And today I'm choosing to face it. Not for you, not for anyone else. But for me, the following days felt like an unending blur of tension. Chloe went through the motions of her daily routine, working at the market, caring for her mother, avoiding her aunt's increasingly desperate demands. But everything felt different now. The encounter with Ethan had shattered the illusion of the simple life she had clung to. It was as though the veil had been lifted and she was seeing the world with new eyes, eyes that questioned everything. As the town festival loomed on the horizon, Chloe's unease only grew. People were buzzing with excitement about the event, but Chloe could barely bring herself to care. The festival had always been a time of celebration, a time when families came together, laughed, and danced. This year, however, it felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. The thought of the festival only reminded her of how trapped she was. Her mother's health was deteriorating rapidly, and Vivian was only getting more insistent about Chloe's marriage to Richmond. The woman's cold, calculating words echoed in Chloe's ears, and it felt like there was no way out. Each time Chloe's thoughts drifted to Ethan, she felt a mix of emotions, confusion, betrayal, and hope. She didn't know what to make of him. Part of her wanted to believe his words, that he hadn't been playing some cruel game, that his intentions were pure. But another part of her couldn't help but wonder if he was just like everyone else, rich, powerful, and detached from the harsh realities of life. Was his act of kindness a genuine reflection of his character? Or was it just another manipulation? Another test? The truth was, Chloe didn't know. But she couldn't stop thinking about him. Ethan's presence in her life had become like a haunting puzzle, a puzzle that needed solving. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, his soft smile when he thanked her for the bread, his quiet strength despite his circumstances. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had been used, just like everyone else had been used in his world of power and wealth. She hadn't seen him since their conversation at the market. Her heart ached with a strange longing, but at the same time, she was afraid of the man who was both a beggar and a billionaire. Afraid of what the truth about him meant for her future. The thought of confronting him again made her stomach churn, but she knew it was something she had to do. That night, after yet another argument with Vivian about her impending marriage, Chloe decided to take matters into her own hands. She couldn't allow herself to be swept away by Vivian's manipulations anymore. She couldn't allow herself to be controlled, to lose the little bit of freedom she had left. She needed to talk to Ethan. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Chloe arrived at the market earlier than usual the next morning, before the crowds had begun to gather. The sun was still low in the sky, casting long shadows across the empty stalls. Chloe's heart pounded in her chest as she made her way toward the market gate, where Ethan had always sat. Her palms were clammy, and she could feel the weight of her decision settling heavily on her shoulders. As she approached, she saw him. Ethan was sitting on the same bench, his back slightly hunched as he held his wooden stick in front of him. His dark glasses shielded his eyes, as always. But this time, there was a difference. There was something about the way he sat, something different about his stillness, that made Chloe stop in her tracks. Was he waiting for her? Chloe hesitated. It wasn't like before, when she would casually drop the bread into his bowl and walk away. This was different. This was a confrontation, and Chloe wasn't sure if she was ready for what was about to unfold. She took a deep breath and walked toward him. Ethan didn't move at first, and for a moment Chloe wondered if he even knew she was there. But then he shifted ever so slightly, his hand resting on the bowl beside him. His movements were fluid, calculated. He was aware of her presence, but he wasn't rushing to acknowledge her. "Ethan?" Chloe's voice broke the silence, but it wasn't a question. It was a plea for truth. Ethan's head turned slowly in her direction, and she felt her heart skip a beat as his face came into view. His expression was unreadable, and yet there was a hint of something. Regret, perhaps, lingering in his eyes. "Chloe," he said softly, his voice as steady as always. "I need to know the truth," she said, her words coming out more forcefully than she intended. "Everything you told me. It doesn't make sense." "You're not what you say you are you?" Ethan remained still for a long moment, his fingers gently tapping the edge of his bowl. Chloe could see that he was weighing his words carefully, trying to decide whether to answer or remain silent. His gaze seemed to pierce through her like he was reading her soul, and Chloe felt exposed in a way she had never felt before. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and deliberate. "I never wanted you to know," he began. "I never wanted anyone to know. But now, I think it's time." Chloe's breath caught in her throat. "Time for what?" Ethan took off his dark glasses and placed them carefully on the table in front of him. Chloe was startled by the sudden change. There in front of her was a man who wasn't blind at all. His eyes, sharp and alert, met hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "I'm not who I seem to be, Chloe," he continued, his voice calm but heavy with the weight of his confession. "I didn't come here for sympathy. I came here because I needed to know if there was still kindness in the world. If someone like you, with so much to lose, could still give without expecting anything in return." Chloe was silent, trying to process the flood of emotions rushing through her. Anger, confusion, and something else. Something like betrayal. But there was also a feeling of relief. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as cruel as she'd feared. "You've been testing me?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and hurt. Ethan nodded slowly. "Yes, but it wasn't just you. It was everyone I met. I've seen too much of the world's darkness, Chloe. I wanted to know if anyone still had the courage to be kind without asking for anything in return." Chloe stared at him, her mind racing. She had been helping him, offering him bread every day, thinking he was just another homeless man in need. But now, she saw him in a completely different light. He wasn't just a beggar. He was a man with power, with wealth, everything she had never had. "Why me?" Chloe asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why did you choose me to help?" Ethan smiled faintly, and for the first time, Chloe saw a warmth in his eyes. "Because you didn't ask anything from me. You just gave. I could see it in your eyes the first time we spoke. You believed in kindness." Chloe's heart swelled at his words, but the hurt still lingered. She had opened herself up to him, trusted him, and now everything felt so complicated. "You didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth," Chloe said, her voice firm despite the vulnerability she felt inside. "You manipulated me." Ethan's expression softened, and for the first time, Chloe saw genuine remorse in his eyes. "I didn't want to manipulate you," he said quietly. "I wanted to know if you would still offer that kindness, even if I wasn't the person you thought I was." Chloe stood there for a long moment, her heart torn. She wasn't sure what to feel anymore. She had given so much of herself, only to realize she had been a part of Ethan's test. And yet, something about him, something in his eyes, made her hesitate. She didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. This was a turning point. Everything had changed in an instant, and Chloe was standing on the edge of a decision that would shape the rest of her life. The silence between Chloe and Ethan stretched out longer than either of them expected. The air around them seemed thick with unspoken words, emotions, and the weight of the truth that had been revealed. Chloe stood still, trying to process everything he had just told her, the facts that no longer fit the narrative she had so carefully constructed in her mind. Ethan had been pretending to be a blind beggar, and now he was telling her it had all been a test. The weight of the words pressed down on her, and the disappointment in his eyes seemed to pierce through her defenses. She had always believed in kindness, in the purity of giving, without expecting anything in return. And now Ethan, the one person she had been helping, had turned her act of goodwill into something she couldn't fully understand. She looked away from him, struggling to find the right words. The feeling of betrayal, small but sharp, gnawed at her insides. She had given him her trust, her compassion, without hesitation. But now, it felt like she had been playing into a game that Ethan had created. "You've been lying to me all this time," Chloe said, her voice low and tinged with disbelief. The hurt in her chest was undeniable, but there was something else, too. A part of her that felt foolish for ever letting her guard down in the first place. Ethan let out a heavy sigh, his eyes softening. He took a slow step forward, his hands tucked into his pockets. "I never wanted to hurt you, Chloe," he said, his voice calm yet filled with regret. "I just wanted to know if kindness was still alive in the world. If people could still offer something without expecting anything in return. And you were the one who proved it to me." Chloe's chest tightened at his words. His remorse seemed genuine, but that didn't make the sting of betrayal any easier to bear. She had tried so hard to do the right thing, to be the kind of person who gave without hesitation. And yet here she was, questioning whether her kindness had been a weakness all along. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "You asked me to be kind to you, but what were you really asking for? Was it all just a test? A game to you?" Ethan's face fell, and for a moment, Chloe saw something in his eyes she hadn't noticed before. It wasn't arrogance or pride. It was vulnerability. A vulnerability that seemed out of place for someone who had lived with such privilege, such power. His voice was soft when he spoke again. "I didn't ask for your forgiveness, Chloe," he said quietly. "I just wanted to understand something. I wanted to see if there was anyone left who could offer kindness without expecting anything in return. You did that, but I never wanted you to feel like you were part of a test. You were never just an experiment to me." Chloe closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her breath. She wanted to be angry, to shout at him, to demand answers for everything he had put her through. But in that moment, all she could feel was confusion. She had been helping him out of genuine kindness, and now she had to process the fact that he had known all along what she had been doing. But even more confusing was the way he spoke now. Like he truly appreciated her actions, like they had meant something. She opened her eyes and looked at him again. "You knew the whole time," she said softly. "You knew I was helping you because I wanted to, and you let me. You didn't stop me. You let me feed you, help you, and now you're telling me it was all to see if I was still capable of kindness." Ethan nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "Yes," he said, "but not just that. I wanted to see if you could still believe in people even when they have nothing to offer you. You've been giving to me without expecting anything, even when you've had nothing for yourself. That's more than most people would do." The words hung in the air between them, and Chloe felt a strange wave of empathy wash over her, despite her frustration. She didn't understand why Ethan had put her through all of this, why he had made her question her own actions, but she couldn't deny that something about him was different from the others who had manipulated her throughout her life. He wasn't just a man of wealth and power. He was someone who had experienced loss, who had seen the darkness in the world, and had tried to test if something pure still remained. Chloe shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. "But why did you choose me?" she asked. "Why did you pick me for your test?" Ethan took a deep breath, as though he was preparing to tell her something he hadn't shared with anyone. "Because," he said slowly, "I saw something in you that I hadn't seen in anyone else. I saw someone who would act out of pure kindness, who would give even when there was nothing to gain. I wanted to see if that still existed in the world. I wasn't trying to deceive you, Chloe. I was just testing something bigger than myself, and you were the one who showed me it was still possible." Chloe's mind raced. She had always believed in kindness, in the idea that helping others was the right thing to do, regardless of their circumstances. But now, in the face of Ethan's revelation, that belief felt uncertain. Was kindness a weakness? Or was it a strength, a way to survive in a world that didn't always reward it? She looked down at the ground, her thoughts spinning. She had been trying to help a man who had everything, and yet she felt like she had nothing. The irony was overwhelming. "I don't know what to feel right now," Chloe said quietly, almost to herself. "I don't know if I can keep helping you, Ethan. You've lied to me. You've manipulated me. And I don't know if I can forgive that." Ethan stood still, waiting for her to say more, but she didn't. Her voice had become hollow, empty of the resolve it had once had. She didn't know what to do anymore. She didn't know if she could keep playing the game he had set up for her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The air around them felt thick, heavy with the weight of the silence. Chloe felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had already cried too many times over the years, and she couldn't afford to lose herself to emotion now. Not when everything was changing. Ethan finally spoke, his voice soft but earnest. "I never meant for this to hurt you," he said. "I never meant to make you feel like you were just a part of some grand experiment. I just wanted to know if there was anyone left in this world who could still give without expecting something in return." Chloe took a step back, her heart heavy with the decision she knew she had to make. She didn't know what to believe anymore, and the weight of it was almost too much to bear. Ethan had shown her that kindness still had a place in the world, but at the same time, he had made her question everything she had believed in. "I need time," Chloe said finally, her voice cracking. "I need to figure this out. I don't know what to do with this. With you." Ethan nodded slowly, his face unreadable. "I understand," he said quietly. "I'll give you the time you need." Chloe turned and walked away, her heart torn. The weight of the decision ahead of her seemed unbearable. She didn't know if she could ever truly trust Ethan again, or if she could ever forgive him for what he had done. But one thing was certain. This wasn't the end of her journey. It was only the beginning. Chloe hadn't seen Ethan for days after their conversation at the market. His absence was a constant, haunting presence in her life. At first, she had convinced herself that it was for the best. The confusion, the betrayal, it was all too much. She needed space. She needed time to think, to figure out what the future could possibly look like now that everything had changed. The person she had been helping, the person she thought was a stranger in need, turned out to be a wealthy man playing games with her kindness. But the days stretched on, and as much as Chloe wanted to push it all aside, she couldn't. The silence between them felt deafening, and the more she tried to ignore the fact that Ethan was gone, the more she realized how much she missed the strange bond they had shared. She missed their quiet exchanges, the way she had felt like she was making a difference, even in the smallest of ways. And despite the shock and betrayal, there was something inside her that couldn't forget the way Ethan had spoken to her. The vulnerability in his eyes when he told her why he had done what he did. Chloe spent her days in a haze, going through the motions of life without really living it. She continued working at the market, putting on a brave face for her customers and the other vendors. But inside, she was falling apart. Her mother's condition had worsened, and the doctors were now talking about hospice care. Vivian's pressure to marry Richmond only increased, and the thought of walking down the aisle to a man she barely knew for the sake of financial stability left her feeling suffocated. The only light in her world was the work she did for the market, the small sense of purpose that came with it. But even that was dimming now. The guilt that had been building within her reached a boiling point one evening when Chloe found herself standing at the edge of the town's river. The reflection of the moonlight danced on the surface, but it felt more like a mockery of the confusion swirling in her heart. How did she get here? The weight of everything, the lies, the manipulation, the truth about Ethan, had finally caught up with her. She couldn't pretend anymore. She couldn't keep pretending that her choices didn't matter. She hadn't gone searching for Ethan, but the truth was, she couldn't stop thinking about him. His words, about kindness, about trust, about giving without expecting, still echoed in her mind. Maybe she had been too quick to judge him. She had allowed her anger and betrayal to cloud her judgment, but now, standing at the water's edge, she realized that she needed closure. She needed to know where she stood. She needed to make a choice, not just about Ethan, but about everything, her future, her family, her values. The decision wasn't easy, and part of her feared what it would mean. What would happen if she chose to forgive him? What if she chose to walk away from the life Vivian wanted for her, and the wealth Richmond offered? Could she ever trust Ethan again? Could she ever trust herself? As she stood there, the sound of footsteps behind her caused her heart to jump in her chest. She turned around to find Ethan standing just a few feet away, his figure silhouetted by the moonlight. She hadn't heard him approach, but he was there, his presence filling the space between them. Chloe's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea what to say, how to feel, but seeing him standing there felt like everything had come full circle. "I knew you'd come back," Ethan said quietly, his voice soft but steady. There was no arrogance in his tone, no smugness, just the same calm and genuine warmth that had always drawn Chloe to him. "I've been waiting for you." Chloe swallowed hard, the words stuck in her throat. "Why?" she finally managed to ask. "Why did you do all this, Ethan? Why did you test me? Why couldn't you just tell me the truth from the beginning?" Ethan stepped closer, his hands in his pockets. "I didn't know how to tell you the truth. I didn't know how to say that I needed to see if someone could still give without expecting something in return. I've seen too much of what greed and power can do to people. And I wanted to know if there was still kindness in the world. Real kindness. The kind that doesn't come with a price tag. You were the one who showed me that." Chloe shook her head, feeling a mix of frustration and understanding. "And you think that justifies what you did? The lies? The manipulation?" Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't let him see her weakness. She couldn't. Not now. "I never meant to hurt you," Ethan replied softly. "I just didn't know how else to find out. I didn't know how to ask, how to test the world without making it about me. I wanted to see if anyone could still believe in goodness without strings attached." Chloe looked down at the water again, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Ethan," she said, her voice thick with the weight of the decision she was about to make. "But I think I understand now. I don't agree with how you did it, but I understand why you did it." Ethan remained silent, watching her closely, waiting for her to say more. Chloe could feel his gaze on her, steady and patient, like he had nothing left to prove. I've been so focused on doing what was expected of me, Chloe continued, her voice trembling slightly, on what my aunt and everyone around me said was right. I've been trying to hold everything together, to be the good daughter, to be the good person. But I don't know anymore. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Ethan took a step closer, his presence warm and reassuring. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You just need to trust yourself. Trust your instincts. You've always been a good person, Chloe. But you can't keep living your life for everyone else. You have to live for yourself. Chloe felt the tears welling up in her eyes again, but she held them back. This was her moment, the moment where she could take control of her life and make a decision that was truly hers, not for her mother, not for her aunt, not for anyone else, but for herself. She turned to face Ethan fully, her heart pounding in her chest. What happens now? She asked quietly. Ethan reached out and gently took her hand, his grip warm and steady. Now, we figure it out together, he said softly. If you'll let me. Chloe stood there, the weight of the decision settling in her chest. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a choice, a real choice. She wasn't bound by the expectations of her aunt, by the obligations to her mother, or by the past. This was her moment to define her future. I don't know where this will go, Chloe said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. But I'm willing to try, for me, for you, for what's right. Ethan smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes. I'll be here, whatever you decide. Chloe nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. She had made her choice. She was no longer going to live her life dictated by others. She was going to live it for herself, guided by her own sense of kindness and what she truly believed in. And no matter what, she would stand tall. The water before her sparkled in the moonlight, a reflection of the choices that lay ahead. Chloe turned away from the river, her hand still held tightly by Ethan, and walked toward the future. Chloe stood at the crossroads of her life, her heart racing with uncertainty and anticipation. The path ahead was uncharted, and yet it felt like a fresh start. The weight of her past decisions, the ones made under pressure, the ones based on what others had wanted for her, had fallen away. Now, for the first time in a long time, she was walking in the direction that felt right to her. She had chosen her own destiny, not the one that had been handed to her. The decision to forgive Ethan, to trust him despite the betrayal, was hard, but Chloe knew that she needed to do this for herself. It wasn't just about Ethan or the strange test he had put her through. It was about her belief in kindness, her belief in the goodness of the world, even after everything she had been through. As she walked side by side with Ethan, the world around her seemed to fade. The market was a blur behind them, the echoes of her aunt's harsh words still ringing in her ears, but they no longer had power over her. This was her moment. Ethan had proven his sincerity, and Chloe had proven hers. They had come together in a way that neither of them had expected. His past was filled with loss and pain, but in that pain, Chloe had seen the vulnerability he had tried so hard to hide. She had seen the man beyond the facade, beyond the beggar, and she had chosen to believe in him. She had chosen to trust him, even after the lies, because that was the person she wanted to be. Chloe's mother, though her time had come to an end, had passed with the peace of knowing that Chloe was no longer bound by the expectations of others. And Vivian, for all her scheming and attempts to control Chloe's life, had been left behind. Chloe didn't need her aunt's approval anymore. She didn't need anyone to tell her who she should be or what she should do. In the days that followed, Chloe and Ethan began working together. He had made a promise to her that day by the river, that they would figure it out together. And they did. They didn't rush into anything. They didn't try to make sense of the whirlwind that had brought them together. They simply allowed their relationship to grow naturally, without expectation, just as Chloe had always wanted to give. Ethan's fortune, though immense, didn't change who he was at his core. He didn't want to live a life of luxury if it meant sacrificing the things that mattered most: kindness, humility, and love. They began to invest in the community, using Ethan's resources to create a foundation for those in need, just as Chloe had once given her bread without expecting anything in return. Together, they built something beautiful, not just for the people around them, but for themselves. They created a life based on mutual respect, understanding, and the kind of love that could only grow when people truly saw each other for who they were. They didn't need to pretend anymore. They didn't need tests. They just needed each other. Chloe found peace in knowing that the kindness she had always believed in could indeed change the world. Ethan found redemption, not in his wealth, but in the way Chloe had seen beyond the surface and accepted him for who he truly was. And as for Chloe, she had become the woman she had always wanted to be, the woman who trusted in kindness, who gave without expecting, and who stood strong in her beliefs, no matter the cost. As Chloe and Ethan looked out over their new life together, Chloe asked herself one final question. What does true wealth really mean? It wasn't money. It wasn't power or status. True wealth was found in the moments of connection, in the kindness shared between strangers, in the ability to look at someone without judgment and offer help without hesitation. It was in the freedom to choose your path, the courage to live authentically, and the strength to forgive. And so Chloe and Ethan's journey continued, not as a story of a beggar and a billionaire, but as a story of love, forgiveness, and personal growth. Was Chloe right to forgive Ethan and trust him again? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about the twists and choices Chloe had to make throughout this journey. Rate this story on a scale of 1 to 10. Did you feel the connection between Chloe and Ethan? Did the story inspire you? Your feedback helps me create even better content for you. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more inspiring stories. I'm working on bringing you more content that challenges the way we think about kindness, redemption, and personal transformation. Thanks again for being part of this journey. Until next time, take care and remember, kindness never goes unnoticed.